So the girls that, myself and Belinda and Debbie, who originally started No Limits, we've all come out of a relationship of domestic violence. We felt that we wouldn't be able to help somebody unless we had lived something. And I believe that today, that you can't help somebody unless you've lived it. So for myself, I married my school sweetheart. We were married for 6 years, and it was extremely turbulent. My husband, alcohol was his go-to, and it was an extremely verbally, physically, and mentally abusive. So through the years, things got worse. I never, because I lived so far from my family, it was always easier not to speak about what was really going on. And I think the reason for that is that I just didn't want to admit that I'd failed. I was told before I got married, because he was unfaithful to me, that I shouldn't marry him, but I did anyway. And so as things started failing and progressively getting worse, in my own head, I was believing the lie that was saying, you're not good enough, you deserve that because you wouldn't listen. But it was a lie, and what happens with a lie is that lie eventually becomes your truth, and you start believing the lies you hear. So when you're told you're fat and you're ugly and you're not good enough and you're not smart enough, you start believing those lies to become your truth, but they're not your truth, they are lies. And our situation just grew to a point where we were so destructive to one another, and we were so destructive in the environment we were bringing up our children. My husband had gone off to his workplace at that time, and he came back a couple of days later. And when he came into the room where I was sitting breastfeeding my 6-week-old baby, he came into the front door, and immediately I challenged him. I said to him, "Where have you been?" And he immediately started getting aggressive with me. He grabbed me around the throat and held me against the wall. And this is what my 3-year-old was witnessing. She came out of her bedroom and seen that. And that wasn't an unusual occurrence for her to see that. There was one evening that we had been fighting, and I had my newborn baby just tucked under my arm, lying in bed, and he came into the room, and because I wouldn't speak to him, he grabbed a hammer and smashed the glass next to the bed, right next to her head. And on the same night, he took a gun and he was shooting the gun, and our neighbor came over to say, "Is everything okay?" And of course I just put on a brave face and said, "No, don't worry about it, we're fine." But I really wasn't fine, because, of course I wasn't fine, but I didn't know who to go to. I was embarrassed, and I definitely felt like a failure. And on the day that he left, when Samantha came in and she saw him holding me against the wall, my neck, by the neck, it was then something in me. I'd heard the Nat on the radio before while I was sitting waiting, wondering where he was, how this lady had taken matters in her own hands. And one night when her husband came home drunk, she took the heaviest vase she could find and just beat him. And he woke up in hospital, and he never ever touched her again. And it was that night, in my own mind, that I started planning how I was going to destroy and hurt this man, that he would never ever have the opportunity to do that to me ever again. And when he walked in and he had me around the neck, holding me against the wall, that was when I realized I was in an extremely difficult and a very, very dangerous place, because I had already decided that either he had to go or I had to go, but we could not continue the way we were. And so as soon as the lady who was helping me with my children arrived for work, I went next door in just my sleep t-shirt and my underwear, because we had had a fight and I tried to take the car keys and my hands were bleeding. I was rubbing my face, so there was blood on my face. And when I arrived at my neighbor who I'd never met before and knocked at his door at 6:30 in the morning, you can imagine the shock he got when he saw my face. I'd been hit in the jaw. I couldn't close my mouth, and he said, "Oh, can I phone the police?" And I said, "No, actually, I've never felt so more clear-headed than this. I just need you to take me to the airport." And I went home and I called my mum, who had absolutely no idea what was going on in my home. And I said, "Mum, if you don't beg, borrow, or steal to get me an air ticket to leave today, I'm going to do something that I might regret forever." And I don't know how she managed, but she got the money together, and about an hour and a half later, I was on my way to the airport. And I arrived at Johannesburg Airport a couple of hours later, and my mum said, she will never forget the view of myself with this tiny little baby and this 3-year-old coming down the escalator with a jaw that couldn't even close. But it was the start of a new life for me. The kind of person I am, for a little while I believed that I wouldn't be able to get it together. I wouldn't be able to take care of my kids, and I would have to go back to that. And I remember a complete stranger saying to me at the time, he said, "You have 2 choices. You can go back to him, and I promise you he will kill you. Or you can pick yourself up, get a life, and start again." And that's the second option that I chose. 3 months later, I had a job, I had a car, I moved into my own townhouse, my children were cared for, and I started again as a single mom. And my end of my story is the best. I haven't spoken about my story for many years. And in fact, as time goes by, that heals you. But I met my husband now 25 years ago, and he was the healing that I needed to start, believing that I was somebody and that I did have something to give, not just as a wife or as a mother, but that through my story I would be able to help others. And I think that for me, No Limits has run close to home on a lot of the situations that have come our way. We wouldn't have been able to help the amount of people we have unless we had lived it. And I'm grateful, I'm really grateful to God that over 25 years I've been married to the most amazing, supportive husband and father, and he's my best friend. And he stands with me, he's on the board with me, and he's not behind me, he's next to me, 100% with me, supporting us girls, encouraging us in what we're doing, and just being an absolute blessing to our lives.